Congratulations on the film. Listen, how much is a film about discovering your own sexuality in a way? I mean, the characters are very innocent, and they really discover love in a way in 24 hours, which is stressful, I think.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not an autobiographical film in a traditional sense. When I was in my final year of high school, I was already very militantly queer and out. I was a very different kid to Nicola. I think energy and soul-wise is much closer to who I was when I was 14. So that was a time when I, knew myself less well. Partly because gays were things that existed on television and not really in the suburbs and day-to-day life of Melbourne in the 1990s. So yeah, but I still was kind of curious to think back on that time and dwell on specifically that, realizing who you are.
I wanted to ask you something else in terms of the film. Half of the film, or a big percentage, of course, occurs in a very tight environment like the car. Sometimes cars symbolize movement, but in this case, I think they symbolize togetherness. And I was looking, when I was watching the film, I felt all those close-ups, and I really felt like the actors felt, like the characters. What did cars mean to you and close-ups?
I think with the cars, I really like the sense that, especially like if you're shooting in daytime and, it's in this public place and it can feel like a mundane, again, day-to-day life. And you're quite public in some ways, but at the same time, you're in this cocoon. So there's a special kind of intimacy that comes from that. And it can kind of catch you off guard because you're just doing this mundane daily task and, you're surrounded by people. So I really wanted that. I also really like that the car kind of forces you to spend time with each other, and especially in 1999, you couldn't just check your phone. You had to either talk or not talk, and both, both gestures are loaded with meaning and feeling. So that's what I was looking to capture. And the close-ups were like, I mean, in the way that I wrote it initially, I thought there'd be a lot more cutaways and wides and things, but I'm always sort of driven by trying to put the viewer in the character's skin, like what they're feeling in that moment. And like, this was like a kind of infatuation that was happening in real time, essentially. And, for Nicola, everything is happening in close up in that moment. There is no awareness of the world around you, especially if you're driving through familiar places where you're like you're going to be quite absent. You're not even looking where you are. So I was even I was like a little bit dumbstruck at how when I was editing it, it just became distracting or silly to cut to a wide shot. Like I think there was enough information there for clarity, I think, and context, and so what was happening. But beyond that, like, is the eyes you need to be, he's pinned on Adam's eyes, and like to a lesser extent, vice versa. And I think you need to be very present with them in that way.
So Goran, the film starts like very intensely with the phone booth and all that, and then it goes into, it was stressful at the beginning, but nice to watch. But then it went into a more deeper and you let us know the characters in a much deeper way and a different rhythm. How did you accomplish that, and how was the decisions to narrative in terms of
well, I mean, the opening sequence is just what day-to-day life feels like for a teenager in that time and place. It is hectic, it is chaotic, and everything is way too serious, even if it's like something as silly as like, oh, we're gonna miss a dance. But to them, it's a life and death matter. Like, even in terms of talking about it, I was telling them like, someone is about to die unless, that was, like when you go into the car for the first time, you're going to war because this is, the most important thing in the universe to you, and to me, that opening sequence and the hectic nature is just like what the universe feels like for a teenager. And then there's a there's a blip, there's a hole torn open in time in the universe. All of a sudden you meet this person who just like, just glued to them. and time stops, and then like that's suddenly time moves and feel you experience it in a different way. And that's why there's that kind of flip in terms of around the, I think, 16-minute mark or something, where you go from this experience of the world, which is just day-to-day mundane, to something that changes dramatically. I kind of try to shoot it in the way that I think a character will remember it later on as well. And I think he's just much more present emotionally and physically, moment to moment, once he sits down in that car and he knows that, you know, we maybe won't make it to dance.